There seems to be a growing number of people that are claiming the drug laws are failing. More and more of them seem to believe that the legalization of drugs is the only workable solution to a very complicated problem. Tonight, you be the judge. Should we legalize drugs in order to beat them? Should we educate and regulate and put the drug pusher out of business? The legalization of drugs, that's the subject when we next meet right here on Speak Out. Everybody, I'm Brent Triest. Welcome to another edition of Speak Out. The subject tonight is the legalization of drugs. A recent Free Press article reported that 70 to 80% of the felonies committed in Detroit are drug-related. Most of the drug pushers that were put in jails during the past year's war on crack are now out on the street. Police officers have been shot, children are being killed, and all of the average citizens are in fear. So I guess with that in mind, my question has to be, is it time that we maybe think about legalization of drugs to beat them? If you think so, applaud. You're applauding very, you think so.
Yes, I'm Virginia Cropsey, and I'm vice chair of the Michigan Libertarian Party, and our platform calls for the legalization and decriminalization of all victimless crimes, and particularly drug laws. Libertarians believe freedom works and that freedom is right. It's not a proper function of government in a free society to regulate personal conduct as long as other person's rights aren't violated, and freedom works. Prohibition doesn't and didn't.
Okay, all right. So legalize drugs and we'll beat them. You agree? I saw you weren't applauding at all when I asked that question. You don't think it works?
That's correct. To legalize drugs would be to do a disservice to this country, to ourselves, and mankind in general. To have a country as strong as ours and to legalize drugs, you're going to weaken the country. You're going to weaken the country economically, technologically, and in other areas.
All right, not
to have people who are going to use drugs, you're going to have people in all walks of life. Doctors who are going to perform operations who are going to be on drugs.
Some say we have that already.
That may be, but would you have a doctor who would work on you in an operation who's a drug addict?
No, okay, thank you. I wouldn't like that at all. I also wouldn't want him to work on me, though, if he's been drinking a lot of alcohol or doing anything else that may upset how he performs whatever he's doing on me. Let's introduce our two guests to you and get sort of an overview of the subject tonight. My first guest is a professor of law at the Detroit College of Law. He's been teaching upcoming and new lawyers for the past 27 years. He believes that it is not working right now, that in fact the drug laws have failed, we cannot keep narcotics out of the country, we cannot build jails and prisons fast enough, and the profits are just too great to discourage illegal drug trafficking, and we should therefore decriminalize or legalize and regulate the sale and use of drugs in order to beat them. The man sitting next to him, however, doesn't agree. His name is Hugh Shanahan, and he's with the Drug Enforcement Agency. He believes that while legalization may generate more tax dollars and maybe even regulate the purity of drugs, it will also increase the number of people who become addicted. He does not believe that legalization will reduce violence or crime. Help me welcome both Professor Norris and Hugh Shanahan to Speak Out.
Good evening, Brent.
Professor Norris, I guess let me address the first question to you. I think everybody agrees that, in fact, we have a serious drug problem in this country, certainly a serious drug problem even in our own backyard. How do you think that the legalization or decriminalization of drugs would affect that positively?
Well, the first thing that I wanted to make clear is that I think that the criminal law is not quite the way to go with regard to meeting this problem. So I'm really talking about decriminalization and not necessarily legalization.
Tell me quickly the distinction. I'm always a bit confused when I hear the two used differently. Decriminalization means to take the criminal bite out of them. Legalization means to you what?
Well, decriminalization means we use less emphasis, employ less emphasis on the criminal process as a way of deterring narcotic use and traffic. Legalization means that there's no criminal penalty associated with it. I look upon decriminalization as a process by which we de-emphasize the criminal law and more particularly emphasize prevention, education, regulation, rehabilitation, the public health approach. And as a matter of fact, in the last year or so, there has been a considerable movement from decriminalization, recognizing its inadequacy and moving in the direction of using other approaches to deal with this very vexatious problem.
Give us an example, if you will. The world, according to Harold Norris, as it relates to a world where drugs have been decriminalized.
Well, I'm not so sure that any nation has fully reached the zenith of social efficacious programs. I think what's really involved here for our nation is to recognize the validity of the premises that you attributed to me, which are in fact true. I participated at a panel discussion up at Traverse City with 5 prosecutors from the 5 largest counties. And what I pieced together from what they had to say as premises, first of all, as you indicated, you have the significant problem that we're not able to keep it out of the country, notwithstanding the FBI, the CIA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Coast Guard. It's coming in. Second, you have the very important proposition that we can't even build the jails fast enough or adequately enough. Third, we have the problem of the prodigious incentive there is with regard to such drug trafficking.
Huge profits.
We have prodigious profits that operates to encourage youngsters as well as syndicated organized crime to deal with this matter. And the point you mentioned also is proposition number 4, the volume of crime associated with narcotics, which leads us to the conclusion that the criminal law approach has really not been as effective as we would wish it to be.
Okay, let me introduce you to the man, as I have sitting next to you. Hugh Shanahan, Drug Enforcement Agency. You've heard Professor Norris outline some of the failings, at least, of the drug laws. What's your response to that?
Brent, Professor Norris, ladies and gentlemen, there's no question that what the professor brings to light are not accurate representations of what's going on. But I would argue that rather than decriminalize or, in truth, legalize drugs and make them more readily available, if indeed we're not having success in what we're doing, then increase our efforts. If you don't like what's coming from foreign countries, then insist that your government do something about those foreign countries. If you're not getting what you expect from your politicians, change politicians. If you don't like what Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia are sending into our country, make it clear to your representatives that you will no longer tolerate what's coming from Peru and Bolivia and Colombia.
Has that not been what we've been doing?
No. There is no war on drugs.
There is no war on drugs. At least some people in this audience don't think that's true.
There is a war on drugs that is promulgated in election years by politicians, but in truth has never been an all-out war. If the United States of America takes a posture of all-out war on substance abuse, there are a number of things that can and must happen to continue to lower the number of users and abusers in intoxicants. In our society, America as a whole, all of us, black, white, brown, yellow, and red, are inundated by intoxicants, and that has to change.
Okay, alcohol's an intoxicant.
Of course.
Tobacco's not good for you.
And they're legal, and they generate tons of money, and they are a tremendous, tremendous deficit to this society.
All right.
Every one of us in this room pays for the use of tobacco and alcohol and the other drugs.
Okay, stand up for a second. You want to talk to me?
Yeah, my name is Alfred McPherson, and I'm president of Personal Skills Management, a human resource training and development company. And I'd like to say there may not be a war on drugs, but there is a war on American people. Right now...
I agree.
And the only way that we're going to be able to defeat the drug problem is take the profits out. Are we kidding ourselves? When 12-year-old kids can make $900 a week pushing drugs, and they're getting peanuts, regardless of how much law enforcement, regardless of what our politicians do, we're going to lose that war. And what we have to do now is take the profit out of it, and I think we can whip the drug war within 6 months to a year if we really make our mind up to it and take all the profit out, as long as they're making the money.
Go ahead, Hugh. Go ahead.
Brent, I'm in charge of the crime prevention section out of the Detroit Police Department, and I have to disagree with the young lady. This is the second time we've addressed this, but when she talks about victimless crime, take a trip down to Hutzel Hospital. Look at the youngsters that are born to addictive parents. Who has to pay for those victimless? We as taxpayers have to pay for that. Pay for those children that are born to addictive parents. What we're stating is a bad message. We're talking to kids. We're telling kids that it's okay to use drugs. Just because there's a problem, we need to look at why are there over 300,000 over-the-counter drugs that can be purchased in this country. Why is this the most abusive nation in the world?
Would you agree with me that it does not seem that we're doing very well in, if it's not a war against drugs, the skirmishes against the drugs? I mean, why are we not... We seem to have a problem. You can't put everybody in jail. There's no jails.
This is true. We need to start at a very early age of education. We need to raise a level of awareness, self-esteem. People talk about comparing this to prohibition. This is apples and oranges. Every year we receive visitors from London, England. They talk about when they talk about legalization of drugs, they said that is the furthest thing from the way the UK does business there. And they found that in London alone, it's become the mecca of the black market for drugs, and they have facilities where you can go and purchase those drugs.
All right, good. Thank you. I'll tell you what, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I've obviously got an audience here that want to address some of the points raised by Professor Norris, Mr. Shanahan. We'll take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Write us, care of Speakout, 920 Ford Building, Detroit, Michigan, 48226. Please direct any questions or comments to the same address.
All right, we're back. We're talking about the legalization or decriminalization of drugs. I'm in an audience with a lot of people that have some strong feelings about this. Go ahead. Tell me what your thoughts are.
Okay, well, I would like to address what he was talking about in England's case with heroin. First of all, they just decriminalized, well, they didn't decriminalize, they socialized heroin. They really didn't ever make any effort to legalize the drugs that are a real problem in society, the high-profit drugs. Heroin's only high-profit because it's so incredibly expensive, yet it's very easy to derive. A question people should be asking themselves is, if everyone in this room were given the opportunity to take drugs tomorrow with nothing attached to it,
no criminal penalty,
would you start taking drugs that you're not using already? That you no, nobody's going to say yes. I was using drugs. They're not. People aren't going to change that much. This belief that you have to ramrod good ideas down people's throats is, I hate to use the word, it's cliche, but fascist, and it makes me sick.
All right, good, thank you. Stand up for a second. Mr. Shanahan, just before I go, you do believe that there will be an increase, at least initially, an increase in addiction or use of drugs if it's legalized.
There's no question about it. And all of the problems that go with intoxication will intensify. There'll be more dead people, more problems related to it, and all you folks are suggesting is that we change the profit from one group of people to the other.
All right.
Well, I'd just like to say that I think it should be pointed out that we've had three different people now talk in favor of maintaining prohibition, and all three of them are drug warriors. We got Detroit Police, DEA. These guys all have a vested interest in this prohibition. They're making their livelihood at it. Meanwhile, us poor honest citizens are having our cars stolen, having our houses broken into, so they can keep their job. Well, I think it's past time. I think the Harrison Act should be repealed, and I think we should get rid of prohibition.
All right, thank you. Stand up for a second.
It's been mentioned here tonight that if we legalize it, everybody's going to be able to have access to it. I mean, drugs have been illegal for 50 years. You got the black market standing outside of every school in this United States selling drugs. Instead of taking your money and wasting it, kicking our doors down and throwing us in jail, addicts have problems. They're sick just like anybody else that has a sick problem, and they should be taken care of just like anybody else. I mean, there's a lot of people here that don't understand this drug problem, and it's easy to stand up there and say, kick their house doors down and throw them in jail and stuff. But I mean, I've been smoking marijuana for 15 years. And I mean, there ain't no court in this system that has one leg or any reason to throw me in jail for it, or anybody else as far as that goes.
All right. Stand up for a second. Go ahead.
The real drug problem in this country is not the illegal drugs that we have currently. The real drug problems is alcohol and tobacco use. 420,000 people die a year between the two of them, and yet the state subsidizes tobacco growers, and the state runs the liquor business. There's your big liquor
you think we should add
companies.
some more drugs to
No,
that?
I'm saying that I am not an alcoholic because alcohol is legal. I'm not addicted to cigarettes. I'm not going to go out and get addicted to drugs if we make the illegal drugs legal tomorrow. And I don't think you will either.
Okay, Professor Norris, go ahead. Go ahead, Professor Norris. You were going to say something.
Well, I'm delighted to have a question asked by a former student, Brent, and I'm delighted to be here. Let me make one point that I think we ought to bring to our attention. A good part of the development of the market is a kind of deliberate inducement by the distributors and people who make money out of narcotics. That is, they ensnare and entrap young people, lots of people, and cause them, first by very minimal payments or no payments at all, to become part of the addict population. And by doing that, they're able to encourage. There's a lure of money attached to making it possible for large numbers of people to become addicts. If that was done through public auspices or public health auspices, at the same time that there is a criminal process, all I'm suggesting is, as Ken Walton, former head of the FBI in Detroit, said, in law enforcement, I don't think we're having an effect. I don't see anything positive on the horizon. I see no good news.
Mr. Shanahan, why don't you address that briefly? And also, it was raised, I'll give you a chance to address it, the fact that police officers, drug enforcement agents have a vested interest in this.
Sure.
If not consciously, at least let it be raised, or it has been raised, that maybe subconsciously you're protecting your own turf. You want to comment on that?
There's no question that the law and order issue involves the hiring of policemen, law enforcement officials, and we pay them to do whatever it is that has to be done. The argument that Ken Walton is making here, I think, Professor Norris, is that law enforcement by itself and of itself is not the answer to the drug problem. There is some truth in everything that each of you have had to say. We don't argue that.
You're just not prepared to go so far as to legalize and regulate.
No, my argument to you is that it doesn't really matter where the drug comes from, whether the profit goes to the federal government of the United States or to the mafia. When your child takes that drug and dies from it, the child is going to be just as dead.
You don't
tax
think
money, the origin of the finances has little to do with it.
Okay, go. I'll get out here and then.
I agree with Mr. Shanahan on that point. It's like giving a suicidal person a loaded gun. What has to be done, I believe, in my estimation, is that the public has to be taught what the real problem with drugs is, where the real disease is, from the emotional level. Because regardless of what addiction it is, whether it's drugs, whether it's relationship addictions, whether it's my own, I smoke 4 or 5 packs a day, the problem is still the same addiction process. And that's what has to be addressed and what people have to learn about, to learn that that is where the real problem with the drug addiction comes from.
One of the things that I hear so frequently are politicians making strong, I'll say, they're saying they're going to war against the drug trafficking.
Only in election years do they say
okay. Whatever it is, I guess what I hear out here a little bit is that are we not sort of fooling the people into thinking it's beatable by busting down doors?
I hope not, Brent.
That it's beatable
I hope that isn't what we're getting across.
Right.
What we're trying to get across is that through education, self-discipline, responsibility of being an American, being a part of the community, whether you use or don't use drugs, and conducting a legitimate all-out war on drugs at all levels in this country and overseas will continue to have an effect.
All right.
Okay, this gentleman back here brought up a point where, okay, most people aren't going to use drugs tomorrow if they had the chance. Okay, that's true with adults, but what about children? What about children who experiment with these things? Just as he said, we've got to start with education. So if we legalize it right away, if we legalize it, what does that tell the kids? We've been saying no all along, and now you're saying, oh yeah, it's okay. So they're going to go and experiment with it?
Go ahead, stand up.
My name is John Sidaway. I'm a physician at Harper Hospital and Detroit Receiving Hospital of Wayne State University. I don't really need another drug added to the type of medical problems I see from alcohol and tobacco, and to add narcotics into this is going to compound a problem that already exists.
But you're not suggesting to me that you don't have that problem now.
The problem exists. I don't see that that changing the availability of the drug or making it legal and decriminalizing is going to lessen that.
You're not saying that it's not available now either. I mean, you see as a physician, there's overdose, there's addiction, there's sickness related to this anyway. I think that's the point.
Even with regulated alcohol, which is somewhat regulated, there are horrendous problems. Adding drugs to this is not going to solve that problem.
Okay, good. Thank you.
A couple of comments. Number one, if I saw people pushing 6-packs of beer on schoolyards, I would worry about kids getting addicted to drugs by virtue of them being legal. We do not see that. The only time we did see that was during prohibition of alcohol. Two...
That's not true, young man, but that's all right. That's blatantly untrue. But
go ahead and answer the point then. Go ahead.
Well, obviously, during Prohibition did work, by the way. All of the things that Prohibition was intended to do did in fact work. Crimes-related alcohol abuse went down. Alcoholics in this country, for the only time in the history, went down. The average age of drinkers in this country went up, not down. Now, the drinking experience you're talking about does in fact take place in the 5th grade in our schools. And just because I can't see it out in the schoolyard doesn't mean they're not being exposed to it in their own homes,
you're telling me people
which
are
is
pushing,
even more tragic.
You're telling me people are pushing 6-packs on schoolyards.
If you watch television and look at the wine ads,
I've been
I
in
would
school,
think that
my friend, and
pushing.
believe me, I've never seen it ever. I've seen the other drugs out there. Another couple of...
I understand.
Somebody else. I'll get back to you if I have time, but I got lots of people who want to talk. Stand up.
You know, I was in high school once, and it probably wasn't that long ago, and graduated in 80, and I know that, yeah, sometimes if you looked for a friend who was older, you might be able to talk him into buying for you, but it was infinitely easier to get marijuana, barbiturates, cocaine, and this is in the suburbs, to get whatever you want.
I think it's a good point. Obviously, this is something we should address always. This is not just a city or urban problem.
In the high schools. And the other matter was, I disagree with both these gentlemen. It's really not opposite views. You have decriminalization and criminalization, and I think decriminalization doesn't carry any of the advantages of legalization. It doesn't change the availability of youngsters, because the person's still dealing illegally, so there's no real incentive for him not to deal with the youngsters, where he could lose a liquor license or his drug license, how it be.
Compare it to, you would like it to be made as alcohol, as tobacco, educate, regulate, and go into business against the drug dealers.
Well, except I wouldn't be for the government spending money to subsidize it as they subsidize tobacco.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I agree.
Brent, one of the issues that hasn't been raised yet is certain immediately addictive substances like crack cocaine. You legalize something like that and get it out, people take it once and they are addicted. How does decriminalization help anyone who is addicted on crack cocaine after use one time?
All right, I think, here, is somebody going to answer that one for me?
Yeah, because I think what a lot of people are doing are obscuring the facts here. What we're talking about is not so much legalizing the drug, but because the drug's already there, we're talking about controlling the drug and taking the profit out of the drug. And we don't take the profit out of everything we've done is just a waste of time.
What are we going to do about the situation he just raised, which is that if you have...
Okay, go ahead.
All right, go ahead. You heard the question.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's to assume that for the first place, we're not talking about and advocating making crack available for first-time consumption. And most people on crack are induced into crack. They do not voluntarily go around looking for crack.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Let's say something else here.
My name is Tim, and I have 2 sons that was in drugs, and drugs real bad, and it's devastating on the family, very devastating on the family, on all the relatives, brothers and sisters, and all the kids, and everybody's involved. It's not just taking a drug. It's very devastating. It hooks everybody, and it controls and destructs the whole family. People doesn't realize it.
In light of your own personal story, do you think that legalization would be a good idea or a bad idea?
Bad idea. No way. It's immoral, and it's kids are just can't. They're growing up. They're young, and they need the vitality to be free of drugs to grow.
Okay. All right. Good. Let me get over here. Do you want to talk to me? Yeah. Okay.
My name is Sally Borden, and I'm with Renaissance West Community Mental Health in Detroit. We see clients who are coming out of the criminal justice system and need drug treatment. We're also seeing people coming in voluntarily who need treatment. This is a very complex issue, and I don't think there is any easy, simple answer. The one point I would like to make, which some of you have touched on, there's a physiological process involved when people become addicted. It's called the disease concept of addiction, which is something AA started in the 30s. Once a person becomes physically addicted to alcohol, tobacco, any kind of drug, it changes their brain chemistry and it changes their neurological system, and they aren't the same person that they were before they started. And I think we need to look at that issue. So it isn't something you put in your body and it comes out and it's not there anymore. There is evidence to show with crack and with some other drugs that people have permanently physiologically changed their brain chemistry. And
Bad stuff.
it's dangerous stuff.
Okay, good. Thank you. Let me get one. Hold on. Let me stand up for a second. Go ahead.
You know, some very important points have been made here tonight. You talk about
Speakout is a production of Continental Cablevision and BST Productions in cooperation with WTVS Channel 56, Detroit.
If we legalize the drugs, the criminals are going to run rampant. Our kids won't have a place to grow up. Their kids won't have a place to grow up. You're saying that the people are breaking into your homes, they're stealing your cars. Who are they? They're the drug addicts that are breaking into your homes and stealing their cars. Because expensive. You're right. Take the profit out of the drugs. You're absolutely take the profit out. But you know what? Take the profit out.